Hello, everyone. Thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 43 years now, in a few days here, and we are still going strong. We're open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and on weeknights from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or weekdays. Our website is always open. You can shop day and night, 24 hours a day at annieblooms.com. We offer curbside pickup, in-store pickup, local delivery, and various shipping options. Let me admit another person here. Welcome, welcome. Oh, people are joining left and right. This is awesome. Yeah, thanks, everyone. Let me put into the chat how you can buy Carolyn's book from Annie Bloom's. There you go. Follow that link. Go shopping on our website. And we got a couple more people to let in. Hello, welcome. We've got some upcoming events on Thursday, this Thursday, the 28th. We'll have another Portland author, Sally Weisinger, reading from her memoir, Yes Again, Misadventures of a Wishful Thinker. And I'm meeting someone else. On Thursday, November 4th, we have two Southwest Portland authors, Edna Kovacs and April Henry. On Tuesday, November 9th, we'll have the launch of Portland author Rachel King's debut novel, People Along the Sand. And another person. Welcome, everyone. It's coming in. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Carolyn Wood with her new memoir, Class Notes, A Young Teacher's Lessons from Classroom to Kennedy Compound. Carolyn is available to sign books, so if you want your book signed or have a personalization request, please include that in the comments when you place your order with that link that I put in there. There'll be a Q&A at the end tonight, so feel free to either type your questions in the chat and I can read those to Carolyn, or you can click on the little hand icon that's in the reactions menu down at the bottom of the screen and ask a question live. Let another person in here. Let me tell you about Class Notes. In May 1968, first-year English teacher Carolyn Wood takes a day off from school to campaign for Robert F. Kennedy. Invigorated by the senator's hopeful message, Wood develops big dreams to affect change beyond just her classroom. So when she's invited to be the family's governess, the appeal is undeniable. Class Notes follows her journey from the classroom into the famous family, 10 boisterous children and one on the way, still reeling from Robert Kennedy's assassination. From inside the Kennedy compound, stories emerge, the glimmer of fame fades, and the young teacher who sought worldliness and sophistication discovers instead the value of enough. Carolyn Wood gained fame as a 1960 Olympic gold medalist in swimming. At 14, she became one of a handful of child athletes to win gold. A lifelong Oregonian, she graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Oregon with a BA in English in 1967, and PSU, then MSW in 1979, and an MS in Education in 1980. Taught high school English literature and composition for over 35 years. Wood is a member of the Oregon State Sports Hall of Fame, a fellow of the Northwest Writing Project, and a past participant in the Centrum Fish Trap and Banff Writers writing communities. Her work has appeared in Teachers as Writers, Alohi Gaduji, sorry, I should have practiced that one first, Journal, REI Co-op Journal, Women Who Write, and Curve Magazine. Her first memoir, Tough Girl, was awarded the 2017 Benjamin Franklin Award by the Independent Book Publishers Association and the 2019 Buck Dawson Award, Authors Award by the International Swimming Hall of Fame. We're gonna admit one more person and then welcome Carolyn Wood.
Am I here?
You're here.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you, Michael, for a ginormous introduction. Sort of awestruck. I want to thank everybody who's here tonight. And just a warning, if you were at the launch on Sunday, it's the same readings and pretty much the same talk. So if you check out, that's perfectly okay. You can leave class early. I want to also thank Leander Starr, who helped me figure out, I hope, how to put in some slides to the talk and a little movie. I would also like to thank Sakara Backinson, who did some directing on a read-through, and her father for helping me do something with lighting. And just a disclaimer, I think the only C I got in graduate school was in audiovisual. So that's a warning to you. I want to give a particular shout out to independent bookstores like Annie Bloom's as the year approaches for us to buy things. I really want to encourage you to support your local independent bookstore, whether it's Annie Bloom's in Southwest or Wallace Books in Southeast, or Broadway Books in Northeast Portland. Another read through, which is selling online, or if you're not in Portland, you can go to indiebound.org and find the local bookstore near you. It's really important for us to support our local business people and to keep the money in our community and supporting our community, not big corporations who drive trucks all over our neighborhoods. Just saying. Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing the screen for a moment and showing you, I can't see myself, so I have no idea what's going on here. I just see little boxes, but I think everything's okay. I'm going to share the screen and a 2-minute video, which some of you may have already seen on the website. It was made by my former student, Boaz Frankel, who is the co-author of a book called Being Weird Together that he wrote with his wife. Very good book. And he was interested in these tapes that I had and thought that he could do something with them. So he took 2 or 3 of them, he listened to them and put together the voice from several tapes with some pictures from Hyannis. And I'm just going to start with that right now. Maybe. Yeah, we are. Okay, here it goes.
Oh, that's cool.
This is your loyal friend speaking from the Robert Kennedy guest house, better known as the haunted house around this area. It's about 10:30 and I'm just about ready for bed as soon as I finish this little gem to you all. Not much happened today. Lee, the secretary, is leaving for a week, and I don't know what's going to happen. And she's been giving me warnings about how difficult the job's going to be and everything, and whose hair to stay out of and that sort of stuff. We had a slight blow up today, which was pretty interesting. I'm supposed to completely ignore those because if I take them to heart, I'll end up with a nervous breakdown like the last governess. Anyway, she said that Thanksgiving is just a rat race and that Christmas is unbelievable because we decorate the house 3 times. Oh, Jackie came home today, but I haven't seen her yet. And Mother, I would suggest that you be very careful in who you talk to and what you tell them. Oh, keep track of the convention. It could be interesting if Teddy gets the nomination, couldn't it? So I guess I'll just tick off here. The tape is running down and I don't know what to say, but tell the kitty cats hello, and Richard, and Barbara and Betty, and Mrs. Lee and Andrea and Bee and Georgie and Simmons and everybody.
Okay, so I'm supposed to do it. Let me just do my little job here. Stop share. Okay. Okay. So the origins of this book, besides the 2 pivotal events of teaching, my first year of teaching, and then going back to the Kennedys, are 2 things that happened previous to that. The first was there was a time when every junior in the Oregon school system, studied American literature their junior year, and wrote a term paper. And I chose Stephen Crane because he only wrote one novel and two novellas, and I didn't really have time to do a lot of reading, so he seemed like a really good choice. Over the years, one story has really stuck with me, and it was a story called An Experiment in Misery, where the narrator, Stephen Crane, spends some time on the Bowery with the bums and the hobos, the homeless people, the houseless people. It was a time of recession. I was interested in that idea of an experiment that had a time limit. And the other person who I ended up teaching every year was Thoreau, who did a 2-year experiment of what it would be like to live very simply in order to have time to do thinking and writing. And towards the end of my career, I had students design a 1-week experiment for themselves where they would do something different out of the ordinary, and then keep track of their feelings, of what they observed, how life was different for them, and what difference it made. I actually had a student who walked from, I forget where he started, but he spent the whole week walking to the coast through the woods. And he ended up carrying his dog the last 2 days, I think he said. Who was that guy's name? Octopinti, I think. Anyway, the idea that life could be a series of experiments was interesting. And when I was writing the book, I thought, yeah, that's what that year with the Kennedys was. It was an experiment in wealth, living with wealth, and also in servitude. The second thing that sort of informs the book was from a class in 1965 at U of O from Dr. Stevenson, a US history class, where one time he said to us, keep a wild thoughts notebook. It might be a good idea. You're at a time when you have strong emotions. To keep track of them will be an interesting record, or to process them. So I had my yellow legal pads, and I began what turned out to be a couple of years of wild thoughts, and then a period of time when there weren't any. But I've always sort of come back to journaling, or I don't know, when I'm on a trip, making note of things. So both of those were very helpful in the writing of this book. So if you think back to that time that I was a sophomore in college, 1965, the middle of the decade, the 1960s began with the election of a president who was the first American president born in the 20th century. 3 years later, he was assassinated my freshman year in college. It was a time when in college we had dress codes, and we had closing hours, and we slept on sleeping porches, which were probably a remnant of the 1918 flu epidemic. But this book focuses just on 3 years, the 1960s, pretty much 1967 to 1970, my first professional job as a teacher. We all have, no matter when we're born, I don't know who all's in attending tonight, but my parents' generation, I know that my parents could tell you exactly where they were when Pearl Harbor happened. I think anybody of my generation could tell you where they were when they heard that John Kennedy had been killed. For my students, it was when 9/11 happened and the towers fell. But I can also remember when the Columbus Day storm blew through. And when I began to think about this period, 67 to 70, these were the events that were percolating behind my life. In June of 1967 was the Six-Day War. I happened to be in New York when that broke out, and it was very scary. That was the Arab-Israeli War. that summer was called the long, hot summer of riots, where seemingly every city in America suffered through riots and fires, including Portland. The ongoing Vietnam War went on and on. In the fall of 1967, the first student from my grade school, Raleigh School, died in Vietnam. And some of my friends' husbands were being sent over to serve there. Then there were the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., followed by Robert Kennedy. And then in that summer, the Democratic National Convention in Chicago that was so chaotic, and the election of Richard Nixon. In 1968 was also the Mexico City Olympics. Our local hero, Don Scholander, swam there. But that was also the Olympics of John Carlos in the Black Power protest. And Muhammad Ali gave up his heavyweight title by refusing to go in the draft and fight in Vietnam. 68 was also when the Beatles put out the Yellow Submarine and the White Album, which many of us will remember. And that summer, the summer of 69, the Apollo space ship landed on the moon. And shortly after that came Chappaquiddick. And then the next spring, the spring of 1970, the National Guard shot and killed several students who were protesting the war at Kent State, and Portland State erupted in riots. So all of these events are going on in the background of this book. But in the foreground, of course, at 21 and 22, is what's happening in your own little life. So for me, it was that first year teaching, which was hard. And the second was the job that I got at the Kennedys. This was a time, I would remind all of us, but especially people who are younger than 70, that this was a time without computers or cell phones or digital cameras. Long distance telephone calls cost $5 a minute. So you didn't call home and you didn't call your friends and you didn't call your boyfriend and you didn't really call anybody unless you could call and collect if you were 21. It was a time when rolls, film came in rolls of 12, 24, or 36. And after you took your very carefully selected photos, you waited a week or more to see if anything turned out. It was a time when people wrote letters to each other with pens or pencils, or maybe they had a typewriter. I wrote tons of letters, and I think Dr. Stevenson would have been proud of me because those were my wild thoughts that I guess I wanted to share and have feedback to. What we did have, though, in 1968 were tape recorders. And those friends who had husbands in Vietnam began to send letters back and forth and on these little 3-inch tapes. And by the time I was at the Kennedy compound for 2 weeks, my parents sent me a tape recorder that our next door neighbor, Bland Simmons, had loaned them, and they got another one. And I began sending tapes back and forth. So I think, yeah, that's the intro. Now I'm going to read. I'm going to read from the prologue. I'm going to do 3 readings tonight, the same ones from the launch. A bit from the prologue and the epilogue, and then a scene, and then something else. Okay. So Sakara says this side looks better, so I'm going to see if I can manage to read, look like I'm looking at you, and be able to manage the bifocals. Okay, here we go. Years after I retired from teaching, while emptying the attic for a new installation, I pulled down the swimming scrapbooks my mother had so carefully kept throughout my racing days. And I set to work telling that story, which became the memoir, Tough Girl. I found another container up there in the attic, a long red and white cardboard box that had once held Christmas wrapping. In it, my mother had stored all the letters that I'd written home from the year I spent as governess. She'd typed them out in duplicate so she could share them with the neighbors and friends. The Beaverton High newspaper, yellow and brittle, carried a letter I'd sent to the student body describing my duties and encouraging them to, quote, someday take a wild step into the unknown, as I did the day I began campaigning for Robert Kennedy. You never know where that first step will lead you. I'm sure that you will find your own adventure. Believe me, it's worth the effort. Pictures of the kids taken those first weeks on Cape Cod in August 1968, and later throughout the year at Hickory Hill, filled 2 photo albums. My mom had stored in a plastic bag the little 3-inch reel-to-reel audio tapes that we'd sent back and forth because long-distance calls seemed too expensive. I counted 25. Will they still play, I wondered? There were a ski bib from Sun Valley, some cards and drawings from the kids, mass cards, and the program from Rory's baptism in January 1969. The trove had been roasting and freezing up in the attic for over 40 years. Who even has a tape player anymore, I wondered. When you're over 75, you've got a lot of stories to tell and not that much time left to tell them. You've made choices and followed paths that maybe you'd like to explore again or to explain to yourself, perhaps, or to your children, your grandchildren, your curious students who asked so long ago. Get busy, I advise. No time to waste. After I hauled that long red and white box down the attic ladder, I worked my way through the letters and journals, postcards, and articles from the Kennedy time, talked with former colleagues, reconnected with friends. Memories and stories returned from that extraordinary and ordinary year. When the audio tapes came back from the lab digitized, I sat at my desk for several minutes before clicking play, reluctant to hear what might or might not be on those recordings. Through a back window, my computer opened before me. I looked out onto the same green plot where my parents had built their home some 80 years before and watched the limbs on a grand fir lift and drop, ferns tremble under a spring rain. And then I listened. The high, young voice that came forth, so confident and funny, made me doubt that it was really me. But when my parents spoke, my father's voice, deliberate and formal, his expression so familiar, and my mother interrupting him with laughter and meandering stories, time overlapped for a moment, with me at my desk and back in 1968 simultaneously. I was eavesdropping on ghosts. So now I'm going to share the screen again. Oh, but the host has to re-able the screen sharing.
Sorry, you're good now.
Aren't you glad? Well, okay, let's try it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Now this is, okay, stop that, stop. So before I left, I had to learn the names of 10 kids because I had no idea who I was going to be governessing. So I had this Look magazine that had the picture of all the kids. Of course, the picture had been taken probably 9 months before, but here they are. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but Bobby, in the back row is Bobby, Michael, Kathleen, Joe, And then over here on the far left is David, Christopher, baby Douglas Harriman, Mrs. Kennedy, Mary Carey, Mary Courtney, and Matthew Maxwell Taylor Kennedy. I ran through the names over and over. Okay, so here we go. Mornings on the Oregon coast emerged from forest shadows and gray mist. It almost felt like home when light whispered me awake the next morning. My eyes blinked to see green light, a salt-scented breeze ruffling the sheer white curtains. The oil painting caught my eye. Had the driver last night really told me that this was the president's room, that he'd painted this picture? You'll be staying here in Mrs. John's house until she gets back from Europe, Bob had said. Just thinking that made my heart speed, my stomach clench. Don't get excited, Carolyn. Get up, get moving. As soon as I looked out the window and saw the sunlight glaring off the sound, where already a few sailboats skimmed across the blue, I knew I was in a foreign land. From somewhere below, out of sight, children's voices piped high and indistinct. It was time to get out and meet the Kennedys. I took a deep breath and turned away from the window. Downstairs, I retraced the path Bob and I had taken at midnight, following a tall, unruly boxwood hedge along the lawn, aiming for the gap I knew opened into the Robert Kennedy driveway. About halfway across the yard, jitters struck, like they had my first day of teaching. Keep walking, I ordered myself. Overhead, a few gulls hung on the updrafts, white against the clear blue sky. Is anyone watching from the silent house behind me? I wondered. Ahead, the house stood still and quiet, the side door entrance closed. Should I knock? I wondered. Through the window, I could see Joe, the butler, plates in hand in a far-off room. The entry room, which I'd learned was also the secretary's office, there were two working up at the Cape that summer, was empty. I knocked and turned the knob at the same time, and Joe looked up, smiled, and put out his hand to wait. He disappeared, quickly returned, empty-handed. Good morning. Ready to get with it, kid? He asked in a greeting I'd come to know was all Mrs. Kennedy. I followed him past the desks and worn-out sofa, past a carpeted staircase, and into the far room. At one end of the dining table, Ethel Skakel Kennedy sat talking on the phone. She looked smaller than I'd expected, but solid, her thick, sun-bleached hair tangled and wild, as if she'd come in from a windstorm. In that leathery brown skin of women who've spent too much time outdoors playing tennis, sailing, skiing, lying out in the sun. Her eyes roved the room while she talked, catching everything momentarily in her foxy gaze. She'd be on the phone or talking with friends almost every time I saw her those first weeks. Even when she stopped talking, you could hear her. Joe, the butler, pointed me to a seat at the other end of the table, not at the end, but next to it. Would you care for eggs or cereal this morning? Joe asked in his proper English accent. I was afraid I would break out laughing. Wheaties, I said. Mrs. Kennedy glanced up, made eye contact, and talked on. If anyone else was at the table that morning, I've forgotten them. All my senses focused on her. Perched on the edge of my chair, I slurped at my Wheaties, waiting for the opportunity to introduce myself and present my father's gift. When she finally ended her call, I stood, identified myself, and handed her the little jar of caviar. Terrific, kid. We'll serve it tomorrow night when the Whitakers and Glens are here. Did she know about the fresh Chinook delivered to Joe the night before? Before I could ask, another call came in, and her focus shifted. I pushed on into my first day with no real instructions. What next? In the bright entry, a young woman now sat at a desk by the front door. Lee Geisen, Mrs. Kennedy's secretary, who would become my touchstone as the weeks unfolded. This morning, she looked up from a cluttered desk, a cigarette smoldering in an ashtray, and commented, "You must be Carolyn. Welcome to the monkey house." Okay. Yeah, all right, let's see. One more reading. I think, wait, here we go. So this is a postcard that I sent home from those first 2 weeks when I was in the John Kennedy house. What had I been thinking when I wrote to Senator Kennedy in the spring of 1968, offering to teach his kids to swim, that I might have a chance to step into history, to meet important people? Back in the 1960s, the president and later the senator and all their relatives and children had become the Kennedys. They represented what we might aspire to, their lofty ideals, their oversized actions, what we might try to emulate. But in the 9 months that I lived with them, I discovered instead their humanity with all its flaws and beauty. I had thought they possessed something I didn't have, something I wanted to know, only to discover that they weren't in on some secret, didn't possess superior knowledge. We all experience worry and jealousy, hope, fear, delight, anger, grief, and love. History is happening all around us every day, wherever we are. In his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, William Faulkner said that the poet's, the writer's duty is to help humanity endure by writing about love and honor, compassion, and sacrifice. It is also the teacher's privilege and duty to lift hearts, to awaken curiosity. It's what Robert Kennedy meant when he urged us to stand up for ideals, to act to improve the lives of others, to send out ripples of hope. What I wrote to my friend Anne about teaching English, I believed throughout my career. Literature provides a window through which we learn compassion and understanding for ourselves and others. Writing enables us to share our questions and our discoveries. My role was to motivate students to read, think, write, and act, to create ripples day after day, year after year. And there's the beginnings of my many, many journals in the tapes that went home. Okay, so stop share. Yeah, and that can go away. And that's it. That's it, folks. I guess we open it now for questions, right? Full screen. Yeah.
Feel free to type those into the chat, or again, if you'd like to appear on screen to ask your questions, there's in the reactions menu down there is a little raise hand thing, so you can do that and I'll find you.
Just going to say that I have been schooled. I have a Halloween, I have an actor's mask taped on the back of my computer. It's from the portrait gallery of the British Museum. And I'm talking to this guy, but hopefully it looks like I'm talking to you.
It does, yeah. That's great. Funny. Don't be shy, folks. You must have questions.
No questions.
Oh, here we go. Barney. Go ahead, Marty. I'll unmute. There
Hi,
we go.
Carolyn.
Hello.
So,
Marty, 2 times in a row.
totally. So last night I listened to the start of the Hatfield lecture series, and it was Yamiche Alcindor.
Oh, yeah.
It was just fantastic about a journalist's job is to get history right and how important diversity is, because then you get everybody's side of the story. And I haven't been able to put your book down. I've just loved it, Carolyn. And I thought, gosh, this is exactly what she's talking about. And so I guess my question is twofold. I'd love to know how did your mom become such an archivist? I mean, and most people don't live in their mom's house, and how lucky you were that she saved all this, or that she wanted you to share all of it.
Right.
Because would you have remembered any of this?
Heck no, in fact. Well, so I'll answer your question. Yeah. My mother kept a journal, diaries. I have all her diaries also from the time she was born in 1910. She has journals or entries in little notebooks of taking the streetcar from 33rd and Sandy Boulevard downtown to see a 15-minute movie, and then going up to Yam Hill to get a ride home with her father from the fish store. So that would have been like 1918 or 1920. You know, she wasn't a hoarder, but she was a saver. Like, I have the blueprints for the house and all the chits of what every nail costs that are in a drawer somewhere. So good luck to my son, Michael, when the end comes. That's one thing. The other thing is that those tapes were very important in clarifying things that I had remembered, stories I'd told, but I had the wrong kid involved. Didn't happen often. I also had a calendar. I mean, I still keep paper calendars. So I had a calendar that had every doctor appointment, every PTA meeting I went to, all that stuff up to 1969. So that was really helpful in making a chronology that was accurate-ish. I mean, it's only my perspective. So, yeah, good question.
Did you choose eggs or cereal at your first breakfast? Asked Judith Rice.
Wheaties. I don't think I ever had eggs there. Eggs was not on there wasn't enough time. I mean, everything was pretty hurried for me.
Carolyn, who replaced you? Did they get another?
You'll have to finish the book.
Excuse me, I've got to go.
I got a good replacement.
Did you find him?
No, kind of. I mean, she'd been there the summer before working for one of the cousins' families, I think the Clasbys, and she was a student at University of Virginia. It was a fortuitous. You'll note it when you get to that chapter. Marty's prepping because I'm going to go to her book club.
Yeah. Gaynell's going to be there. She's a brand new person to Portland. So
Gaynell Nolf?
What?
Gaynell Nolf?
No.
Oh.
Raise your hand, Gaynell.
We have another question from Gretchen Lobitz, or
Actually, it's Charles.
Charles.
Yeah, hey, Chuck.
Yes, hi, Carolyn. I was wondering to what degree you felt like a member of the family, or you felt like an employee outside the family.
I think
Or anything in between.
You know, I was in a peculiar position. I mean, I didn't know what a governess was. I ate at the table. I was in their house 24 hours a day for days and days and days, because I hardly ever got any days off. So in that way, I was a member of the family. But of course, I was conscious of my role of not being part of the family. And I think that separation became clearer as I moved along. But I also feel like, and there's some, I write about how I sort of the movement into feeling apart, which involved some heavy teasing. It's kind of like, some families, when people start poking you that now you've arrived.
Mhm.
It was that kind of a family,
Yeah.
I think. But I was, you're an employee always, which was hard, was a little hard for someone. Speaking of diversity, I mean, what could be more middle class and white than coming from Beaverton, Oregon in 1968 into a household where all the staff was white, the secretaries, me, and everybody else was a person of color. And they had a different status. But all of us were employees and not school district employees.
A question directly to me from Kat Buist. What is the most challenging experience you had there?
Oh man, Kat, I don't like those kind of questions that are like the most. It was all challenging. And I think there were moments of tremendous sadness that were very challenging because I hadn't dealt with anyone dying in my world. There were times when I got in trouble and felt that that wasn't fair. And I wasn't used to taking orders from people. I was kind of used to giving them, or so that was very hard.
Suzanne Klassen has your description of your first year of teaching reminded me about my first years in the early 1970s. Mimeograph machines, the smell of the school halls, the conversations with kids and colleagues, all brought such fond memories. Did you journal about that first year with those descriptions?
I did have some journals, and I this is the weird thing, Suzanne, and anybody else who's been a teacher. I still remember the first and last names of those students that, there's other years everybody blends together, but man, that first year and that experience of the boy, well, maybe it's not even in the book. Yeah, the boy who lights the match and I send him down to the office. I know him still. So yeah, I think those were just etched out of pure adrenaline, those memories. Because they're all kind of bad, the ones that I remember, except for that the psychedelic jello coloring. But that Rockwell, I think that kid's name was. Yeah.
Do you write in the book about what it was like to come home from this experience?
Do I?
Do you write about that, or
I write about what it was like in January when I came home. I had a week off, which was the longest period of time I had not been in 24-hour contact. But yes, I do talk about it. And then I have when I went back to teaching, that was like the difference of that from the first year.
Kathleen Worley wants to know, can you talk about the difference in process between writing Tough Girl and class notes? That's a question.
Yeah. Tough Girl started really in the classroom, just in these little vignettes that I wrote with students for about 12 years. And I tried to string them together. And that took about 2 years without much success until I went to Andrea Carlisle, who explained to me that a book needed to have like a through line, which seems like after teaching 35 years, you would know that yourself, but I never paid attention to the process of completing a whole book. So that I did have archival material because I had scrapbooks and letters from the Olympics. Well, actually, I only wrote one, but there was peripheral stuff. And I can remember the feelings of the water. I mean, I remembered a lot about swim meets and water and practice. The Kennedy book was much more begun by typing all the letters that I had written home. My friend Ann Williams had about 15 letters that I had written to her through that year, maybe 10. And they were long. I would have a day off once in a while, and I would drink a lot of beer, and then I'd write these long letters. And I typed all those out also. And in that process of writing, a lot of the memory came back. And then when I got the tapes, I had to sort of start over again. But I think the other part of the process, Kathleen, is mostly I write in the wintertime when it's rainy and when I can go someplace that's not home and sit for a long period of time and write. And that was the same in both books when I actually tried to finish them. And also going on these 2 and 3 week long retreats in a place that I didn't know, and began a kind of process of having some notes, writing, going for a long walk, having lines or thoughts come back, write for a couple of hours, type it, then come back to it. Those kind of stretches were really important. And that was the same for both books. Summertime can't possibly write. You have to be outdoors doing stuff, as we know.
Do you have another question, Marty?
Yeah, so what would 75-year-old Carolyn say to the governess about the grieving process? Because as teachers, we hear those such personal, it was a surprise to me as a teacher that you do grief counseling, you know, or divorce or whatever.
You know, I just didn't have.
It doesn't sound like they got any.
None. But I don't think that 75-year-old could tell Carolyn anything that would have made a difference except to be present for those kids. And I was present for them, but I wasn't going to encourage them to talk about their father until the end when Kathleen put that book together. And I have their drafts, and I think, wow, I didn't know about the writing. For some of you, I mean, you guys who are my students know that we did a lot of writing in class where we had those prompts and we would write for 10 minutes. And then I didn't really get trained in that until the 1980s. But I can see the prompt that I gave the kids when they had to write about their dad, which was, let's think of 3 things that was really fun to do with him, or what you miss, and did that sort of pre-write. And then they went and they wrote, or I don't think anybody dictated to me. They wrote their pieces, and then we, worked them out a little bit further. And everybody did a very different sort of essay. But that was in the spring, so time had passed.
Question from Gaynell Schenk. Do you still have contact with any of the Kennedy family members?
No, and I explained that in the book. I was there 9 months, really. I was a passing ship in the lane. But I did hear from them for about 2 years. And then when David died, Courtney contacted me to write about him.
Carolyn Hudson asks, hi, Carolyn. I'm a former student. It's so good to see you. I am wondering if you connected with one child in particular or found an especially strong bond with anyone at the compound.
I think the two, Courtney and David, who were the 2 oldest that were at home when I was there, were probably my favorites. And I don't know if it was because they were closer to my age and I could sort of talk. I really miss talking to people. I don't know. Yeah, I was just out of college, so I was used to having a lot of people around. But I also had a lot of fondness for Max, Max and I spent a lot of time. He wasn't old enough to go to kindergarten. So when the kids went to school, Max and I would go do things like, I don't know, go to Great Falls and look at the waterfall and play with sticks and all the kind of stuff that you do with little kids. David, I think, though, was David was interesting to me. I mean, people who have read the book have said that they feel like that was the closest tie, the strongest, and there were those bad boys were always kind of my favorite students for some reason. Yeah.
Right. Laura Plunk wants to know, do you have plans to write any more books?
I have some ideas just because I want to go take 3-week vacations to Banff. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I have something else, but I'm not sure I would publish it. I do have something else that I want to write about, but it might just be for the family.
Nice.
On the other hand, I might want to go do some adventure, an experiment. And yeah.
One last question. Oh, it's actually not even a question. Ginny Daly says, I love the photos, especially the one of you and Gretchen in your swimsuits. You were so cute.
Oh, thanks, Ginny Lou.
Oh, Marty asking, when did you quit smoking?
I quit smoking when I got pregnant. I mean, I cut down quite a bit because I also took another class after AV it was a health class in the summer for smoking cessation. And you got 2 hours of credit and they took you up to the VA and we saw a guy smoking through a hole in his throat. And I started doing the Kennedy trick of borrowing other people's cigarettes as a way to cut back. It's not a proud part of my life, but I'm glad I quit.
Not a good look for an Olympian.
No, and Mrs. Kennedy was right in informing me of that, but
Just a mere mortal.
yes.
All right, do we have any other questions?
I'm really glad that you guys have been so kind because I was really nervous about this. It's kind of wrecked my whole day.
You did a great job.
Well, I think I got those slides going, so
I was going to say,
my French horn playing student will be very proud of me, I'm sure. I'll report tomorrow.
You did a good job. Oh, Suzanne has another question.
Yeah.
You said you had very little experience with working with small children. How did you learn so quickly?
I guess I'm just a quick learner. Kids kind of teach you what to do. And, I had been around kids on swim team of varying ages, not 3 and 4-year-olds. They just teach you. My book is dedicated to students and teachers because what is life except all the time we're students and all the time we're teachers. And,
well said.
All right, well, if we have no more questions, yes, cheers. As Marty's doing over there, shaking her hands. It's great. Yeah, thank you everyone so much for coming. This is a really great event. Great to see so many people here. The event's being recorded. I think I probably told you that as you entered the room. It's going to be up on our YouTube channel, Annie Bloom's YouTube channel later tonight. So folks who missed this, you can tell them to go and check it out there. And thanks so much. We hope to see you at another event sometime soon.
okay.
Thank
you so much, Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Carolyn.
It was great.
Great.
Good night, everyone.
See you in the future.